I never thought I'd get caught sneaking into the apartment complex pool after hours, let alone by the one guy I'd been secretly crushing on for months. But there I was, drenched and shivering, when suddenly this calm, amused voice just said, "You know the pool closes at 10, right?" So yeah, that happened. Let me back up a little. My name is Jamie, and I live in this pretty average, kinda boring apartment complex on the outskirts of the city. Nothing fancy, but the rent's decent, and there's a pool that almost no one uses after sunset, which, I admit, is why I've gotten into the habit of sneaking down there late at night when everything's quiet. Honestly, it's my little escape from the usual stress, a private dive into cool water when the world feels too loud. Here's the kicker. The pool area is right next to where my neighbor, Ben, lives. He's this guy from the floor above, mid-20s, always looks put together, like he could be an ad exec or something. Tall, lean, with this kind of easy smile that makes you feel like everything's fine, even when it's totally not. We've exchanged a few hellos in the hallway over the year, but mostly just brief nods, nothing serious. But I'd been crushing hard on him for months, and somehow sneaking into the pool at night felt like my little secret adventure that might, one day, lead to something more. On this particular night, I'd just finished a long day of work and was craving the kind of calm only a midnight swim can give. The apartment was dead silent when I slipped out, careful not to wake my roommate. The pool gate was supposed to be locked, but someone had forgotten to latch it properly. Jackpot. I didn't even hesitate. The water was colder than I expected, but it felt amazing, like washing off all the noise and fatigue of the day. I floated there, staring up at the stars, thinking about how lucky I was to have this little escape. Then, out of nowhere, I hear footsteps on the concrete, slow and deliberate, and a voice that sounded way too familiar for me to ignore. "You know the pool closes at 10, right?" I froze, half submerged, heart pounding like I'd just been busted stealing candy as a kid. I looked up, and there he was, Ben, leaning casually against the wall, arms crossed, with this smirk that made me want to crawl back into the pool and disappear. Instead, I did something I never imagined I'd do. I swam over to the ladder, climbed out, and faced him. What happened next? Well, that's a story you won't want to miss. So there I was, dripping wet, with no good excuse, except maybe I needed a swim. Ben didn't look mad or anything, just amused, like he'd caught me doing something mildly entertaining rather than outright wrong. I rubbed the back of my neck, trying to figure out what to say. Yeah, I know. I finally admitted, trying to sound casual but probably failing miserably. I just needed to cool off. Long day. He raised an eyebrow, and I could have sworn the corner of his mouth twitched into a grin. Sure, midnight swims. Classic stress relief. I laughed nervously, suddenly feeling awkward in a way I hadn't expected. Usually I'm pretty chill, but standing there with the guy I'd been crushing on for months, soaked and caught red-handed? Yeah, not exactly my smoothest moment. Ben stepped closer, just a little, still leaning casually against the wall. Look, I'm not gonna kick you out or anything, but you probably shouldn't make a habit of this. Management's got eyes everywhere. I blinked, surprised. Really? You're not mad? Nah, he said, shrugging. Besides, I get it. Sometimes you just need to jump in and pretend the world isn't so loud. And just like that, the tension started to shift. His tone was easy, like he was inviting me into some unwritten truce instead of calling me out for breaking the rules. I felt a flutter of hope and something else. Maybe this was my chance to finally talk to him like a normal person, not just a shy neighbor. So, I said, trying to sound casual but feeling anything but, "You hang out here often after dark?" He chuckled. "No way. I'm more of a morning swimmer. But tonight, I couldn't sleep. Thought I'd get some fresh air before I completely lost it." That hit a nerve. I nodded, suddenly realizing we both had our reasons for being out there at weird hours, looking for quiet. "I'm Jamie," I said, holding out a hand. "Ben," he replied, shaking it firmly. We stood there for a moment, just looking at each other, the night wrapping around us like a quiet bubble of calm. I realized how much I wanted to know more about him, to hear his voice without the usual distance of hallway hellos. "So, what keeps you up?" I asked, surprising myself with the question. Ben shrugged again, but his eyes looked a little softer. "Work stress, mostly. Deadlines that don't care about 2 a.m. Also some personal stuff." "You?" "Pretty much the same. Plus, I guess I just like the silence here. The pool, it's like the world pauses for a bit." He nodded, understanding. "Yeah, I get that." There was a beat of silence, comfortable this time, not awkward. I wiped water off my face, suddenly aware we were both standing by the edge of the pool, me soaked, him dry but clearly awake in a way that made me want to ask more. "Want some company?" I blurted out before I could stop myself. Ben's grin widened. "You asking me to sneak in with you?" I laughed. No sneaking, just talking. Normal human interaction." He shook his head, clearly amused. "All right, normal human interaction it is." We ended up sitting on the pool deck, feet dangling just over the water, talking about everything and nothing. Ben told me about his job at a marketing firm, how the pressure was crazy, but sometimes he loved the creativity. I told him about my job at the bookstore down the street and how it was peaceful in its own way. Somewhere between stories about bad coffee and embarrassing childhood memories, I forgot all about being caught sneaking into the pool. It was like we'd stumbled into this quiet, shared world just for the two of us, away from deadlines and locked gates. At one point, I noticed Ben's gaze linger on me a little longer than before, and my heart stuttered like a scratched record. I tried to play it cool, but inside, I was buzzing. "Hey," he said softly, breaking the silence. "If you ever want to sneak in again, just let me know. I'm kinda lonely out here sometimes." I smiled, feeling warmth spread through me, not just from the water dripping off my skin. "I might take you up on that." We sat there a while longer until the chill finally crept in and made us shiver. Ben stood up, stretching like he'd just woken from a nap. "Well, I should probably get back before the night shift catches me wandering," he said with a grin. "Yeah, me too," I replied, standing and grabbing my towel. As we walked back toward the gate, side by side, I realized this night was turning into something way better than just a late-night swim. It was the start of something I hadn't dared to hope for, maybe even a little spark between two guys who finally found a way to break the ice. And honestly, I couldn't wait to see where it went from here. We reached the pool gate, and for a second, neither of us moved to open it. The night air felt electric between us, like we both knew this wasn't just some random late-night encounter. I shrugged, trying to act casual but feeling like my heart was doing a marathon. "So you actually want to hang out sometime?" I asked, sounding more hopeful than I intended. Ben smiled, that easy grin that always made me feel like maybe I wasn't completely invisible. "Definitely. How about coffee? Tomorrow?" "Yeah, I'd like that," I said, suddenly realizing I hadn't been this excited to see anyone in a long time. He pushed the gate open and stepped through, glancing back over his shoulder. "I'll text you." "All right," I said, watching him disappear down the hallway. I stood there for a moment, soaking in the fact that I'd just had an actual conversation with Ben. Like a real one. And yes, I'd been caught sneaking into the pool, but somehow that little moment turned into something way better than I could have imagined. The next day felt like it dragged on forever, but also flew by at the same time. I caught myself staring at my phone way more than I should have, hoping for a message. And sure enough, around mid-afternoon, there it was. "Ben, coffee tomorrow sounds good. Meet you at that cafe by the corner?" I typed back instantly, trying to keep it casual. "Perfect. What time?" "7, after work." I smiled so hard it probably looked weird. 7 it is. That night, I kept replaying our conversation at the pool. The way he laughed at my terrible coffee stories, the way his eyes softened when he talked about work stress. I realized I was really looking forward to seeing him again, not just because of the crush, but because he made me feel like I wasn't alone. When I got to the cafe the next evening, I was early, trying to look like I wasn't nervously checking the door every 2 seconds. Then Ben walked in, looking just as casual as ever in a simple shirt and jeans, but with that same easy smile that made me forget how to be smooth. We grabbed a table near the window, ordered coffee, and just started talking. It was incredible how natural it felt, like we'd known each other way longer than a few minutes by the pool and a handful of hallway hellos. He told me about his family, growing up in a small town, moving here a couple years ago for work. I shared some stories about my own messy childhood, and for once, I didn't feel like I had to hide the awkward parts. Midway through, he leaned over the table and said, "I'm really glad we ran into each other last night. Not just at the pool, but like, us talking." I felt a warmth spread through my chest that had nothing to do with the hot coffee in front of me. Me too. I was kind of hoping for a chance to get to know you better. He smiled, that slow, genuine smile that made butterflies explode in my stomach. Well, consider your wish granted. After coffee, we walked around the neighborhood, just wandering and chatting like old friends. At one point, Ben stopped by a little street musician playing guitar and pulled me close to listen. I caught his eye, and he gave me a quick nudge with his shoulder. It was the kind of moment that felt tiny but meant everything. As the evening turned cooler, we ended up back near the apartments, neither of us ready to say goodbye. Standing there, I realized I didn't want this night to end. Not because I was desperate, but because I genuinely liked him, more than I'd admitted to myself before. So, I said, heart beating way too fast, "Think you'll be sneaking into the pool again anytime soon?" He chuckled, eyes shining. "Maybe. But next time, it'd be nice to have company. Officially. Like, no sneaking." "Deal," I said, grinning. He stepped closer, just a little, and I caught a faint scent of whatever cologne he wore. Clean, a little woodsy. My brain short-circuited for a second, but I managed to keep it together. Then, out of nowhere, Ben surprised me by brushing a damp strand of hair off my forehead. "You're kind of adorable when you're caught breaking the rules." I laughed, feeling like all the awkwardness from the night before was gone, replaced by something real and open. "Maybe you're just easy to catch," I teased. He grinned, then paused, looking a bit more serious. "I want to see where this goes, Jamie, if you're up for it." I nodded, my throat suddenly tight with feeling. "Yeah, me too." We stood there for a moment longer, the world around us quiet except for the distant hum of city life. And just like that, the late-night swim that started it all felt like the first page of something new, something I was finally ready to dive into, no matter where it took me. After that night, things between Ben and me settled into this strange, wonderful new rhythm. We weren't officially together yet, but we were definitely more than just acquaintances. It felt like we were tiptoeing into something real, and honestly, I was both excited and terrified at the same time. Our late-night swim had become this little inside joke between us. One evening, a couple of days later, Ben knocked on my door just as I was about to crash into bed. "Pool's open," he said with a grin, holding up a bottle of sparkling water. "Come on, midnight swim." I hesitated. Part of me wanted to stay put and binge-watch some terrible TV. But the other part, the part that had been waiting for this, said hell yes. So I grabbed a towel and followed him downstairs. The pool area was quiet and glowing under the soft lights. We slipped inside, no sneaking this time, just two people sharing a secret spot. The water was cool and refreshing, but it was the company that made the night memorable. We swam a few laps, then just floated side by side, staring up at the sky. I could hear the faint chirping of crickets mixed with the distant hum of the city. Ben's arm brushed mine, and I felt a jolt shoot through me. "Crazy how few people use this pool at night," he said softly. "Yeah, I agreed. It's like our own little hideout." He turned his head toward me, eyes glinting. "I'm glad you got caught that night. Otherwise, I might never have had the guts to talk to you." My heart did a little flip. Me too. We talked about everything, our dreams, our fears, stupid things that made us laugh until we were gasping for breath. At one point, I noticed how the moonlight caught the curve of his jaw, how the water droplets clung to his eyelashes. Before I knew it, we were sitting on the pool's edge, legs in the water, leaning close enough to feel each other's breath. I wasn't sure if I should say something or just enjoy the moment. Then Ben looked at me, his voice low and a little hesitant. "Jamie?" I've been wanting to do this for a while. My heart was pounding so loud, I thought it might give me away, but I nodded. "Me too." And then he kissed me. It wasn't some dramatic movie-style thing. It was gentle and real, like he was telling me without words that he cared. His hand found mine, fingers lacing together comfortably, perfectly. Time slowed, and despite the cool night air, I felt warmer than I had in a long time. Afterward, we stayed there for a while, just holding hands, not needing to rush into words. Eventually, we swam back to the stairs together, drying off and walking back to our apartments with that quiet, happy kind of smile. The next morning, I woke with this strange mix of nervousness and excitement. I expected maybe awkwardness, some weirdness between us, but when I bumped into Ben in the elevator, he just smiled and said, "Morning, Jamie." No awkwardness? I teased. He shook his head. Nope. Feels like we're just getting started. Over the next few weeks, we fell into a comfortable pattern. Coffee dates, late-night swims, and plenty of text messages that made me grin at my phone like a fool. We shared playlists, introduced each other to favorite books, and started talking about things I usually kept to myself. One afternoon, Ben invited me over for dinner. His apartment was stylish but cozy, with shelves full of books and plants that looked way healthier than mine ever did. We cooked together, laughing at our lack of skills in the kitchen, and then settled on the couch with a bottle of wine and a movie neither of us really paid attention to. At one point, Ben reached over and squeezed my hand. "I'm really glad you snuck into the pool that night," he said quietly. "Me too," I said, feeling my cheeks warm. He looked at me with those clear eyes, and I realized how lucky I was to have found this. Someone who saw me in a way that felt honest and kind. But, like any good story, it wasn't all smooth sailing. A few days later, I caught Ben looking distracted during one of our hangouts. When I asked, he hesitated, then admitted work had been overwhelming again. There were deadlines and some office drama that was stressing him out. I listened, trying to be supportive without pushing too hard. I wanted to be that safe place for him, like the pool had been for me. One night, we were at the pool again, sitting on the edge with our feet in the water. "You know," I said, "this place feels like our little sanctuary now." He nodded. "Yeah, even when the world's crazy, this is where I can breathe." He turned to me, eyes serious. "Jamie, I don't want to mess this up. You're important to me." I squeezed his hand, my voice steady even if my heart was racing. "You're important to me too, Ben. And we're in this together." We stayed there a while, holding each other close, finding comfort in the quiet night. Looking back, I never would have guessed that sneaking into a locked pool would lead me here, finding someone who saw me, caught me, and stayed. And honestly, I can't wait to see where this goes next. Not that I'm usually the sentimental type, but that pool quickly became our unofficial spot, not just for swimming, but for every little thing that didn't quite fit into the rest of our days. It was like our safe zone, where the city noise faded, and it was just us. We'd go late at night, sometimes just to sit on the edge and let our feet dangle in the water. Sometimes we'd race each other, splashing and laughing like idiots. Other times, we'd just lie back on the lounge chairs, staring up at the stars and talking about everything from dumb childhood memories to where we saw ourselves in 5 years. It wasn't always perfect. Ben's work stress still crept in, and I had my own quirks and insecurities I was trying to manage, but somehow being with him made those things feel lighter. One evening, a couple weeks after that first kiss, Ben surprised me. He showed up at my apartment with a bunch of takeout and a blanket, and without saying much dragged me down to the pool deck. It was the kind of spontaneous thing I didn't expect from him, but loved all the same. We spread the blanket out under the string lights, plates balanced on our knees, and just ate like two hungry idiots. The conversation drifted from serious to silly, and at one point, Ben pulled out a little speaker and put on this playlist he'd made for me. It was a mix of indie tunes and 90s pop songs I secretly loved but never admitted to. "I made this for you," he said, grinning like a kid who'd just pulled off the best surprise ever. I rolled my eyes but smiled. "You're kind of a jerk, but thanks." He nudged me. "Hey, you like it." We fell into that easy comfort again, the kind where silence isn't awkward but welcome. I remember thinking how strange it was, how someone I'd barely talked to months ago was now sitting beside me, sharing food and music, making me feel calmer than I had in years. But life, being life, decided to throw a curveball. A couple days later, I noticed Ben growing distant. He wasn't texting as much, and when we did hang out, he seemed distracted, like there was a storm behind his eyes he wasn't ready to share. One night, I found him sitting on the pool stairs, staring down at the water, his usual easy smile nowhere to be found. "Hey," I said softly, sitting next to him. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Work's a nightmare right now, some big project, and it's all-consuming." I nodded, wishing I could just snap my fingers and make it better. "Want to talk about it?" He shook his head. "Not really, but thanks for asking." We sat there for a while, the silence stretching between us. I hated seeing him like this, so weighed down and exhausted. I reached over and squeezed his hand, hoping to remind him he wasn't alone. "Hey," he said finally, turning to meet my gaze. "I'm sorry if I've been distant. I don't want to drag you into my mess." I smiled gently. "Ben, you don't have to protect me. We're a team, remember?" His eyes softened, and for a moment I thought he might say something more. But instead, he just leaned his head on my shoulder, and I let him. Those small moments, just being there for each other, were what made us stronger. A few days later, things took an unexpected turn. I was heading out to work when my phone buzzed with a message from Ben. "Can we talk?" Like, really talk. "Meet me at the pool tonight?" My heart raced, part curiosity, part worry. What was this about? That night, I found him waiting by the pool, nervously pacing. His hands were stuffed deep in his jacket pockets, and when I approached, he stopped and met my eyes. "I've been offered a job," he blurted out, "in another city. It's a great opportunity, but it means moving away." For a second, I couldn't process it. The thought of him not being just a few floors up, of our late-night swims turning into distant memories, hit harder than I expected. "Wow," was all I could say. "I know," he said, voice tight. "I'm scared to tell you because I don't want to lose what we have." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Ben, this please maze, but I want you to take the job if it's what you want. I don't want us to end." He looked relieved, like he'd been holding back that confession for days. Neither do I. We sat in silence, the weight of the moment settling around us. I didn't have answers, but I did have this undeniable feeling that whatever happened, we cared enough to try. In the weeks that followed, we clung to our routine as much as we could. Late-night swims, coffee dates, long talks. We didn't talk much about the move, but it was there, like a shadow lingering just out of sight. One night, after a particularly long swim, we sat on the edge of the pool, water dripping from our skin, and Ben reached out to tuck a wet strand of hair behind my ear. "Jamie," he said softly, "no matter what happens, I'm glad I found you, even if it's just for a little while." I looked into his eyes and smiled, feeling something swell inside me. "Me too, Ben, no matter what." We leaned into each other, the world falling away again, and in that moment, it didn't matter where tomorrow would take us. What mattered was here, now, together. For a few days after Ben told me about the job offer, the apartment felt strangely quiet, like we were both holding our breath, waiting for the other shoe to drop. The pool, our refuge, felt different too, like it knew something was changing. I tried to keep busy, burying myself in work and books, but every time my phone buzzed, my heart skipped a beat, hoping it was Ben checking in. He was still around, still coming over, still stealing those late-night swims with me, but there was this subtle distance, a hesitation in his smile that wasn't there before. One Friday night, I found him sitting on my couch, a little more serious than usual. He'd brought over a bottle of wine, but instead of our usual easy chatter, he just stared into the glass like it held all the answers. "What's on your mind?" I asked, plopping down beside him. He sighed, finally meeting my eyes. "I've been offered a chance to lead a project in the new city. It's a big deal for my career, but it's not just any job. It could change everything." I nodded slowly, trying not to let the knot in my chest grow tighter. "Yeah, I get that. And it sounds amazing. I just wish it didn't feel like we're standing on the edge of some cliff." Ben gave me a small, sad smile. "I know. Me too." We sat there in silence for a while, letting the weight of the future settle between us. Eventually, I reached out and took his hand in mine. Hey, whatever happens, I want you to know this. Being with you has been the best part of the past few months. His eyes softened, and he squeezed my hand. Same here, Jamie. Hell, I never thought sneaking into a pool would lead me to this. I laughed softly, the memory of that ridiculous first meeting flashing back. It's weird how life works sometimes. Ben stood up and walked over to the window, looking out at the city lights. I don't want to lose you, but I also don't want to stop myself from growing. I got up too, joining him at the window. Maybe this isn't about losing or stopping. Maybe it's about figuring out how to hold on and grow at the same time. He turned to me, hope flickering in his eyes. You really think that's possible? I nodded. I do. We've got something real, Ben. That's worth fighting for. He smiled, a little brighter this time, before pulling me close. Promise me we'll try. No matter what. Promise, I said, feeling a fierce determination building inside me. Over the next week, we started planning for the inevitable. Ben's trip to the new city was just a month away, and while we tried to enjoy every moment, the countdown loomed over us like a storm on the horizon. One afternoon, we decided to take a break from the stress and go for a swim. The pool was quiet, the water sparkling under the afternoon sun. We raced like kids, splashing each other and laughing until we were breathless. Later, sitting on the edge, legs dangling in the water, Ben looked over at me. You know, I'm going to miss this. Miss us. Me too, I admitted, feeling a lump in my throat. He reached over and brushed a wet strand of hair from my face. But this isn't goodbye. It's just, see you later. I smiled, heart full despite the ache. Yeah, see you later. That night, we stayed up late, talking about everything and nothing. We made plans for visits, promised frequent calls, and dreamed about what could be. When the day came for Ben to leave, I drove him to the airport, trying to keep it together even as my chest tightened. Hey, he said, pulling me into a hug that felt like a lifeline. This isn't the end. Just a new chapter. I nodded, burying my face in his shoulder. I'm lucky to have you, Ben. You're lucky to have me too, he teased, making me smile through the tears. As he walked away, I stood there for a moment, watching until he disappeared into the crowd. The pool, the late-night swims, the stolen moments, they weren't over. They were just waiting for the next time. And honestly, I was ready to fight for every one of those moments, no matter where life took us. Months passed, and yeah, the distance was tough. No sugarcoating that. But somehow, Ben and I made it work. Late-night calls became our new poolside chats, and every visit felt like a little oasis from the busy world. We learned to lean on each other in ways that didn't need constant presence. It was different from sneaking into a pool after hours, sure, but just as real. One weekend, I found myself on a train, heading to visit Ben's new place. When I got there, he was waiting with that same easy smile I'd fallen for. We kept it simple, no grand gestures, just quiet dinners and long talks, the kind that build something solid. On my last night there, we ended up on his balcony, wrapped in blankets, watching the city lights flicker against the dark sky. It reminded me of those nights by the pool, the feeling of finding calm in the chaos. Ben looked over at me, brushing a messy strand of hair behind my ear. You know, I was terrified when I moved here, scared I'd lose everything, especially you. I smiled, my heart warm. I was scared too, but sometimes the scariest things end up being the best parts of our story. He reached out, taking my hand in his. I want us to keep writing this story, no matter where we are. I squeezed his hand back, feeling that same steady hope that had kept me going. Me too, Ben, no matter what. Later, as I headed back home, I realized that no matter the miles or the challenges, what Ben and I had wasn't just about proximity, it was about connection. The late-night swims, the stolen conversations, the quiet moments, they all led to this. A bond built on trust, understanding, and the courage to take chances. So yeah, sneaking into that pool wasn't just a midnight adventure. It was the start of something real, something worth fighting for, and honestly, that's pretty damn amazing.